Some breaking news, Donald Trump has now been hit with his fourth indictment, this time by a grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia. We won't know the full extent of the charges until his arraignment, which will be his first in-person court appearance in this case, but we're looking almost certainly at racketeering or RICO charges, conspiracy charges, false statements, solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer, and many more. And of course, at the heart of this indictment is the crime that Trump was caught doing on an audio recording by calling Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and pressuring him to find 11,780 non-existent votes in the state.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country, because, you know, there's just, it's a testament that they can admit to a mistake, or whatever you want to call it, if it was a mistake, I don't know.
This indictment was especially timely as Trump had begun ramping up his attacks against prosecutors and witnesses. For example, he posted, "I'm reading reports that failed former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, will be testifying before the Fulton County grand jury. He shouldn't. I barely know him, but he was, right from the beginning of this witch hunt, a nasty disaster for those looking into election fraud that took place in Georgia. He refused having a special session to find out what went on, became very unpopular with Republicans, I refused to endorse him, and fought the truth all the way." And just to be clear, what Donald Trump just did there is a crime. Here's my Legal Breakdown co-host Glenn Kirshner explaining why in our most recent episode.
He posted that he knew that the former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, was going to appear before the grand jury. That's important. Why? Because prosecutors can prove he knew Duncan was going to be a witness against him. And then he said, and I quote, "He shouldn't testify." If that's not witness tampering, more specifically under Georgia state law, it's called influencing a witness, and it's a 2 to 10 year felony. And what I just described, that post about somebody he knew was about to testify before the grand jury, is absolutely witness intimidation, witness tampering, influencing a witness. And if that represents a violation of Georgia state law, and I absolutely believe it does on the facts, on the evidence, that can serve as a basis to revoke him in his federal case because, as we just discussed, the judge said, while you're on release in this federal case, your most important condition is that you not violate any federal law, any state law, or any local law. So I think Donald Trump has a world of hurt about to come crashing down on him.
He also waged a number of attacks on Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, including ones like this.
And I probably have another one. They say there's a young woman, a young racist in Atlanta. She's a racist. And they say, I guess, they say that she was after a certain gang and she ended up having an affair with the head of the gang or a gang member. And this is a person that wants to indict me. She's got a lot of problems, but she wants to indict me to try and run for some other office. What's going on in this country is, and by the way, wants to indict me for a perfect phone call. This was even better than my perfect call with Ukraine. Remember that call? That was a perfect call. This one's better. This one is more perfect.
And so given these attacks, the prosecution and the court have a vested interest in moving more quickly. Why? A few reasons. One, Trump is trying to ramp up pressure against witnesses not to testify against him, knowing full well that his supporters will make their lives a living hell. And so right now, it's all but guaranteed that Jeff Duncan will face the wrath of Trump's henchmen, who will undoubtedly issue threats against him and his family. The longer that Trump is allowed to walk free before being subjected to the rules of pretrial release, the more runway he'll have to obstruct justice in his own case. And remember, the court's top priority right now is to protect the integrity of this case. And second, because Trump is trying to poison the well of the jury pool. By attacking the prosecutors and the judge, he is sending a signal to any potential jurors out there that this prosecution is illegitimate and political and that he's the victim here. And if he can poison the mind of one single person who ultimately ends up on the jury, that's all he'll need for it to be hung. The convictions in a criminal case have to be unanimous. So if he can convince a single person that what he's saying is true, then he'll have found a way to protect himself. himself. He knows exactly what he's doing, and it's for no reason other than pure manipulation. And for a second time, the court's priority right now is to protect the integrity of this case. If they see that this trial is at risk, they will move quickly to mitigate any factors that are putting it at risk. But here's the most important part. Think about why Donald Trump is working so hard to destroy this prosecution in particular. It's because this one potentially poses the biggest risk to him. Why? Because Trump has a plan to deal with the DOJ cases. It's to push the federal cases until after the 2024 election, win the presidency in that election, and then use the levers of government to absolve himself of any accountability. Maybe he'll pardon himself, maybe he'll appoint a corrupt attorney general who would remove the DOJ from its own prosecution against him, maybe he'll invoke the 25th Amendment and get his vice president to pardon him. The point is that there are levers at his disposal, if he does win, that he could use to help himself. And as unlikely as it is, that doesn't change the fact that this guy is banking on it and banking hard. But when it comes to Fulton County, it's not as simple, because that's a state crime. And even if Trump were to figure out a way to win the presidency in 2024, even a president couldn't issue any pardons for state crimes, only federal ones. You'll remember, too, that in July, Trump tried to get the Georgia Supreme Court to decide, by fiat, that Fani Willis should be prevented from continuing her prosecution of him. The court unanimously rejected his request, which is doubly beneficial, not just because it was the right thing to do, but also, if he gets convicted in Fulton County, he'll have the opportunity to appeal. And the highest court he could appeal to is the same Georgia Supreme Court that just unanimously rejected his anti-democratic effort. And look, that's not to say that the Supreme Court judges in Georgia are a bunch of far-left liberals, because they're not. In fact, every single judge was appointed by a Republican, but at the very least, they all agreed not to humor Trump's anti-democratic efforts once, and so at least there's the possibility that they can do it again if he were to try to overturn the conviction. And it is a sad commentary on today's judicial system that we have to hope that judges will defer to the law over their fealty to a politician, but that's what you get when a cult of personality has infected an entire political party from top to bottom. Trump is now contending with a staggering 4 criminal trials. Aside from this one in Fulton County, he's also being prosecuted in Washington, D.C. for his efforts to steal the 2020 election, in Florida for stealing classified documents from Mar-a-Lago, and in Manhattan for his hush money payout scheme. He's also awaiting the New York AG probe for business fraud, and he'll be going to trial for a second defamation lawsuit brought by E. Jean Carroll. When Donald Trump claimed that he was the law and order president, I didn't realize he meant he'd be on the receiving end of it. Now keep in mind, Donald Trump will cry victim. He'll pretend that he's the subject of some political persecution. He'll claim that Joe Biden has weaponized the federal government against him. But let's be clear, Joe Biden did not indict Donald Trump. The Democrats did not indict Donald Trump. No politician indicted Donald Trump. The indictment was returned by a jury of everyday Americans in Fulton County based off of the evidence, of which there is an absolute ton. That is why Donald Trump is being prosecuted in Georgia and also elsewhere in New York and Florida and Washington, D.C. But he is pretending that this is a persecution because he lacks the capacity to take responsibility for his own actions. Because something party of personal responsibility. But of course, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I say to debunk Trump's lies, because as far as he's concerned, none of this is about the truth. It is about perpetuating a narrative that he thinks will help him. He thinks that if he can convince people that he's the victim of some unseemly persecution, that he could taint the jury pool and get himself a hung jury in Georgia. Or for his federal trials, that he can curry favor in the next election, become the next president, and then use the levers of government to withdraw what would be his DOJ from prosecuting him. Those are his Hail Mary plays. Remember, Trump has no defense here. Fani Willis has him dead to rights, and Jack Smith has him dead to rights. Trump's own former officials have nearly all conceded that Trump is screwed. The witnesses against him are almost all Republicans. Trump is backed up against the wall, and there is no lengths he won't go to try and avoid being held accountable for his own actions. So you should absolutely expect more lies from Trump, because after all, this is what landed him here in the first place. If Donald Trump was capable of telling the truth, he wouldn't be facing 4 criminal indictments. If he was capable of telling the truth, he wouldn't have needed to pressure state officials and inventing imaginary votes. If he was capable of telling the truth, he wouldn't have needed to engage in a criminal conspiracy to breach voting machines. If he was capable of telling the truth, he wouldn't have needed to get a slate of false electors to undermine the will of the voters. If he was capable of telling the truth, he wouldn't have needed to try and cover up all of that. But Donald Trump is not capable of telling the truth, and he never was. So expect the lies, expect the obfuscations, expect the incitements to violence, because these are his only tools, and they're the tools for which he's currently being prosecuted in court. So we can employ these things at his own risk, but he's about to learn that there are consequences for his own actions. So while he may entertain the rubes in the Republican base with his lies, something tells me that a Fulton County jury won't be quite as forgiving. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on this screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.